The city was quiet that evening, though not completely empty. The streets were wet from a drizzle that had stopped just minutes before. Neon signs flickered over puddles, reflecting colors that seemed brighter than the actual lights. Most people were indoors, either working late or returning from errands, but one figure moved swiftly through the shadows, keeping close to walls, careful to avoid any attention. She was not human, though she tried to look like one. Her face was pale, almost too smooth, with eyes that seemed a shade too bright in the dim light. Her hair was long and black, but its shine was unusual, reflecting more like metal than natural hair. Her clothes were too plain for the city's style, but they helped her blend in just enough to avoid suspicion. Her steps were light, careful, almost calculating, as if each movement had been measured and planned. She had been on the streets for hours, going door to door. Each time she knocked, hoping someone would offer shelter, warmth, a safe place to rest. Each time she had been turned away. Some people claimed they had no room, others looked at her with suspicion and fear. Some had called authorities, whispering words she didn't fully understand. With each rejection, the weight of despair grew heavier on her shoulders. Her name was Lyra. She came from a distant world, one where her people were being hunted, marked as dangerous and unwanted by a powerful galactic coalition. She had escaped, traveling light years to find safety. Earth was supposed to be neutral, a small world unlikely to attract attention from larger powers. She had hoped she could hide here, among humans who were simple, unaware, and, she thought, easy to manipulate. But humans, she was learning, were not as predictable as she had imagined. She stopped in front of a small, modest house on a quiet street. The windows glowed warmly, and the smell of cooking floated faintly through a slightly open door. From the outside, it looked ordinary, peaceful, and safe. She hesitated, unsure if this would be another rejection, another failure. She glanced around the street. It was empty now, the drizzle leaving only a faint mist in the air. No authorities, no watchers. For the moment, it was just her and the door in front of her. Her hand lifted, trembling slightly. She knocked once, then twice. A shadow moved inside. The door opened a crack, revealing a man in his late 30s. He had short brown hair, a tired face, and eyes that seemed both curious and cautious. "Can I help you?" he asked, his voice calm but firm. Lyra swallowed, feeling the desperation rising inside her. She needed to act quickly. If she hesitated too long, the opportunity might vanish, and the drones tracking her could catch up. Her voice came out steady, though she forced a polite smile. "Please, I need shelter. Just for tonight. I will do anything." She had learned human behavior from observation, long enough to understand that they responded strongly to family, relationships, loyalty. She took a deep breath and decided on a bold lie, one she hoped would work. I will act as your wife. I will live here, pretend we are married. I only need a place to stay. No one will question us if we appear normal." He looked her up and down, as if trying to understand if she was serious or mad. Lyra held her gaze, steady, desperate, and unyielding. She had no time for hesitation. The drones could be nearby, and she could not risk being caught. "You what?" he said slowly, his voice showing confusion. "I will pretend," she repeated. "Just act as if we are married. I will follow your rules, stay out of your way. I only ask for shelter. I promise I will not cause trouble." Perhaps it was something he could not explain. Finally, he stepped aside. "Come in," he said almost reluctantly. "You can stay, but we set some rules, no funny business. You follow my house rules and we're fine." "I promise I will follow your rules." "I'm James," he said, extending a hand. "And if you're going to pretend to be my wife, I guess I should know your name." This was more than she had hoped for. It was safety, temporary as it might be, and a chance to survive another day. As she settled into the small room, she looked around. The walls were plain, painted a soft beige. A bed stood against one wall, neatly made. A desk in the corner held a small lamp and a stack of papers. It was modest, but it was hers for the night. She sank onto the bed, letting herself breathe for the first time in hours. But even in safety, she could not rest completely. Her mind raced with worries. The coalition hunters would not stop looking for her. Drones could appear at any moment. She could not let them find her. And now she had added another complication. James, a human who had no idea what he had agreed to. She thought about him. James was ordinary average in a world that seemed full of extraordinary threats. He could have turned her away. He could have called authorities. But he had not. He had trusted her, or at least given her a chance. She felt a strange sense of responsibility toward him, something she had not expected. She had come here to survive, not to care for anyone else, yet already she felt the weight of protecting him, too. Meanwhile, downstairs, James poured himself a cup of tea. He could feel the tension in the air, the unease that came from hosting a stranger, someone who claimed to be his wife, for reasons he did not yet understand. He did not fully trust her, and yet something about her desperation struck him. He had lived alone for years, used to his routines, his quiet life. But something told him this was not a simple visit. James thought about the strange stories he had heard in the news, aliens, refugees from other worlds, threats that seemed far away and unreal. Yet now here she was, standing in his house, pleading for shelter. And strangely, he felt a flicker of curiosity, a sense that this encounter was not random. That maybe, somehow, he had been chosen for a reason he could not yet see. Upstairs, Lyra pressed her hands to her face, trying to calm the racing thoughts. She could feel her alien physiology reacting to the stress, the faint tremor in her limbs, the quickened heartbeat. Humans were simpler in some ways, but they were resilient, stubborn, and resourceful. That was what made this plan risky, yet it was her only option. If she played her role correctly, if she adapted to this human world, she could survive. She took a deep breath and forced herself to relax. Tomorrow, she would need to learn more about James, about human habits, about what she could do to maintain this fragile disguise. She would need to be convincing, careful, and clever. The smallest mistake could expose her, and then there would be no more chances. Outside, the city lights flickered, and the mist from the drizzle hung low, curling around street lamps and sidewalks. It was quiet now, but not peaceful. Somewhere in the distance, unseen eyes could be tracking her. She could not afford to forget that for even a moment. Yet, for the first time in days, she felt a small sense of hope. Hope that she had found a temporary safe place. Hope that maybe, just maybe, humans were capable of more than she had assumed. And as she lay down, staring at the ceiling, she realized that survival was no longer just about escaping her past. It was about navigating a new world, learning to live among humans, and perhaps discovering something unexpected about herself along the way. Tomorrow, the real challenge would begin. But tonight, for the first time, she had shelter, warmth, and a chance to catch her breath. And in a galaxy that had been hunting her relentlessly, that was a rare and precious gift indeed. The next morning, sunlight streamed weakly through the thin curtains of the small spare room. Lyra woke early, as she always did, before James stirred from sleep. The human's home was quiet, almost ordinary, and she could almost forget for a moment that she was an alien on the run. But the weight of reality quickly returned. The coalition hunters would not give up so easily, and she could not afford any mistakes. She dressed simply, choosing clothes that would not draw attention, and moved quietly into the kitchen. James was already there, making breakfast with calm precision. He did not startle at her presence, nor did he question it. He poured himself a cup of coffee and glanced at her. "Morning," he said. "I hope you slept well." "You should eat something. Breakfast is important." He set a plate of eggs and toast in front of her. Lyra looked at it with curiosity, having observed human food before but never tasted it herself. She picked up a fork and took a small bite. The flavor was simple but satisfying, comforting in its normalcy. They ate in silence at first, the quiet broken only by the occasional clink of utensils. Lyra studied James from across the table. He was human, yes, ordinary in almost every way, but there was something in his demeanor she could not ignore. He had patience, calmness, and an air of quiet strength. He seemed harmless, yet she sensed a determination beneath his calm surface, a stubbornness that humans carried in surprising ways. After breakfast, James stood and moved to the sink to clean the dishes. "I assume you didn't come here with any possessions," he said casually, rinsing a plate. "That's fine. You can use the spare room for storage, but keep it tidy. Nothing strange, nothing dangerous, got it? Now I have work today and you can do what you want. Just stay inside and don't attract attention. People can be nosy." As James left, she took a deep breath and began to explore the house. It was modest, neat, and filled with the quiet hum of human life. She opened drawers, examined books on the shelves, and peeked at photographs. Pictures of James with friends and family, smiling on holidays, reminded her that humans had deep bonds, connections she had only read about in her studies. For a moment she wondered what it would be like to be part of such a world, not as a guest, not as a pretender, but as someone who belonged. The thought was fleeting, quickly replaced by the need to focus. Survival was her priority, and she could not let herself get distracted by longing. The day passed slowly. Lyra busied herself with small tasks, cleaning the spare room, reading books, and observing human behavior. She found that James had left instructions for simple chores, feeding the cat, tidying the kitchen, keeping the place in order. Each task seemed ordinary, yet it gave her a rhythm, a sense of normalcy that she had not felt in weeks. By mid-afternoon, she sat by the window watching the street below. People passed, unaware of the alien woman living quietly in a human home. She felt a pang of guilt. She was pretending to be James's wife, using his kindness to hide herself, yet she had not fully considered the risk to him. If anyone discovered her true nature, James could be in danger as well. Her thoughts were interrupted by a sudden noise, a low hum almost mechanical coming from outside. She froze, listening. The sound was faint but persistent, moving closer. Her heart quickened. The drones, they had found her. She moved to the door, peering through the small window. In the street, a sleek metallic craft hovered silently, its sensors scanning the surroundings. Panic rose in her chest, but she forced herself to remain calm. She could not let James see her fear. She needed a plan. When he returned home that evening, she greeted him quietly. "James, we have a problem," she said, her voice steady but urgent. He raised an eyebrow. "Problem? What kind of problem?" "They are looking for me. I think they are coalition drones." "That might work in our favor. Humans have tricks, information networks. We can use them." As night fell, the hovering craft retreated slightly, unable to act without breaching local laws and attracting attention. Lyra felt a flicker of hope. Humans were not as weak or passive as she had assumed. They had laws, social systems, and networks of support that could turn the tables against much stronger forces. Over the next few days, life settled into a careful rhythm. Lyra pretended to be James's wife, learning about human habits, daily routines, and small domestic details. James observed her carefully, noting how she adapted quickly, how she anticipated problems, and how she learned from observation. One evening, as they prepared dinner together, James spoke casually. "I don't know how real your marriage story is, but I can tell you one thing. Humans are stronger than you think. Not physically necessarily, but in ways that matter. We adapt, we protect, we endure. Don't underestimate that." It did not always win battles by force, but it won loyalty, trust, and survival. She began to feel a strange bond forming. It was not love, not yet, but a recognition. James was ordinary, but he was extraordinary in his steadfastness. He had given her shelter without hesitation, trusted her in ways she did not expect, and used his human ingenuity to protect them both. She had come here to survive, but she was learning that survival could involve connection, trust, and even friendship. Meanwhile, the Coalition watchers continued to monitor from afar, puzzled by the humans' ability to protect and adapt. They could not understand the laws, the social structures, or the moral resolve that seemed to shield Lyra. They expected weakness, but they found cleverness, determination, and subtle defiance instead. Lyra realized that humans were not simple. They were resourceful, inventive, and capable of unexpected action. And that realization brought her hope. If she could rely on James, and if she could navigate this strange new world, she might survive after all. By the end of the week, Lyra had settled into a cautious rhythm. She cooked, cleaned, observed, and learned. She maintained her role as the human wife, careful to follow rules and act convincingly. James respected her space, giving her autonomy while keeping an eye on potential threats. And together they began to form an unspoken alliance, a human and an alien facing a galaxy that would not forgive weakness. One evening, as the sun set and the sky turned a deep shade of orange, Lyra looked at James quietly. "I have been surprised," she said softly. James glanced at her, curious. "Surprised? I thought humans would be easy to manipulate, predictable. But you are strong in ways I did not expect. You are patient, clever, and persistent." She had come to this planet expecting to hide, to survive through cunning and disguise. But now she saw that survival was also about understanding, observing, and learning. And more than that, it was about trust. For the first time since arriving on Earth, she felt a flicker of something she had not allowed herself to feel. Hope, not just for herself, but for what could be built here. If humans were this capable, perhaps they could change more than just her immediate fate. Perhaps they could change the galaxy itself. As night fell, they ate dinner together quietly, the distant hum of city life outside providing a steady rhythm. Lyra felt a growing sense of calm. She was still in danger, still hunted, and still a stranger in this world. But for now, she had shelter, a human ally, and a chance to live another day. And sometimes that was all that mattered. The following morning, Lyra awoke to a strange sense of tension in the air. The sun had barely risen, yet the city outside seemed different, quieter, heavier, as if the streets themselves sensed something approaching. She dressed quickly, choosing practical clothes that allowed her to move easily if needed. Every step she took was careful, measured, her mind racing with possibilities. James was already in the kitchen, reading news updates on his tablet. He looked up as she entered. "Good morning," he said, though his voice carried an edge she had not heard before. "We have visitors." "Well, not exactly visitors. I think they suspect something is here, something they shouldn't ignore. We need to be smart. They can't just break laws here without consequences, but they'll test boundaries. We act normal, we stay calm, and we stay alert." Lyra cleaned the house, prepared meals, and maintained her role as James's wife, all while keeping an eye on the streets through the windows. She noticed the drones, small, sleek devices that hovered silently, scanning the environment. They moved methodically, almost like predators hunting a cautious prey. James, meanwhile, communicated quietly with his contacts, using local networks to track any unusual activity. He seemed calm, almost confident, but Lyra could sense the tension beneath the surface. He was human, yes, but humans had an unpredictable strength, resilience in the face of danger, and the ability to plan and adapt in ways Lyra's species often underestimated. By mid-afternoon, the drones began approaching closer to their street. Lyra's pulse quickened, but she did not panic. She moved to a spot behind the curtains, keeping herself partially hidden while observing the devices. They were scanning, recording, mapping, looking for something specific, something that could identify her. James joined her quietly. "We need to make them doubt what they see," he whispered. "Humans are good at deception in subtle ways. Sometimes the simplest things can confuse even the most advanced technology. I'll distract the drones by triggering some activity further down the street. Humans can manipulate patterns. They won't expect it, and it will give us time." Lyra washed dishes, folded clothes, and kept the appearance of a quiet domestic routine, while James set up small devices outside to redirect the drones' attention. Soon, the drones shifted course, drawn by the decoys. Lyra watched in awe as James's strategy unfolded perfectly. The Coalition's advanced machines were smart, but not infallible. Humans had an advantage they rarely counted on: creativity, intuition, and unpredictability. Once the immediate danger passed, Lyra exhaled, a mixture of relief and admiration flooding her. "You are remarkable," she said softly. "I did not realize humans could think like this, strategically, creatively. We are not the strongest species in the galaxy, but we are clever, and we care about those we call our own. That matters more than brute strength." Humans could be ordinary in appearance yet extraordinary in action, capable of outwitting forces far larger and more dangerous than themselves. As the evening approached, the tension eased slightly, but not completely. Lyra and James shared a quiet meal, eating slowly, savoring the normalcy while remaining alert. Outside, the city lights flickered to life, and distant sounds of traffic reminded them that life continued, indifferent to the danger lurking nearby. After dinner, they sat together in the living room, the silence broken only by the hum of the air filter. Lyra studied James quietly, noticing the subtle ways he observed the world. How he listened for unusual sounds, how his eyes scanned patterns, how he thought several steps ahead without making it obvious. She realized she had much to learn from him, not just about survival on Earth, but about the resilience, ingenuity, and moral resolve that humans carried. "You trust me?" he said suddenly, as if reading her thoughts. Lyra looked at him, surprised. Yes, I must. There is no other choice." Lyra prepared for rest, but remained vigilant, listening to the faint sounds of the streets and the occasional distant hum of distant drones. Sleep came fitfully, but it came. She dreamed not of capture, not of fear, but of strategy, of humans and aliens working together, of a possibility that survival could lead to something greater. The next morning brought an unexpected development. A knock at the door. Lyra froze, heart hammering. James moved first, cautious but calm. He opened the door slightly, peering through the crack. Outside stood a human official, someone from local authorities, clipboard in hand. "Good morning," the official said politely. "I'm here conducting a routine check in the neighborhood." "Nothing to worry about." Lyra watched from the window, impressed. Humans could manipulate social structures, exploit rules, and protect those they cared about in ways that went beyond simple strength or technology. She realized that she was not just surviving here, she was learning. By afternoon, the drones returned, more cautious than before. Lyra and James worked together seamlessly, blending into domestic routines, using small decoys and human behavior to confuse the machines. It was exhausting, but also exhilarating. For the first time, Lyra felt a sense of partnership, of genuine connection, even if their relationship was still defined by necessity. During a quiet moment, Lyra spoke. I came here thinking I would have to rely on my abilities alone. But I see now that humans are capable of incredible things, not through power, but through intelligence, persistence, and morality. I have underestimated your species. And when someone we care about is in danger, we fight in ways that surprise even ourselves. As night fell again, the drones retreated to survey elsewhere, thwarted by simple human ingenuity and careful observation. Lyra and James sat together quietly, the tension of the day giving way to a fragile sense of calm. You've changed the way I think about humans, Lyra admitted softly. And you've reminded me that survival isn't just about strength or intelligence alone, James replied. It's about trust, teamwork, and the willingness to do what's right, even when it's difficult. But she had found something else entirely, a human ally, a shared purpose, and a glimpse of hope that survival could mean more than mere existence. Outside, the city lights glimmered and distant hums of drones faded into the night. For now, they were safe. But tomorrow would bring new challenges, new tests of patience, intelligence, and courage. And Lyra knew that with James at her side, she had a chance not just to survive, but to learn, to grow, and perhaps to belong in a world that had seemed so alien only days before. For the first time, she understood something vital. Humans were not simple. They were clever, adaptable, and capable of incredible resilience. And as she lay down to rest, she felt a quiet certainty that, together, they could face whatever the galaxy might throw at them. The following morning, the city felt heavier than usual. The sun rose slowly through a thin layer of mist, casting long shadows over the streets. Lyra moved quietly through the kitchen, preparing a simple breakfast while listening to the subtle sounds of the world outside. Even in the ordinary hum of the city, she sensed the weight of approaching danger. James entered the kitchen, carrying his tablet. His face was serious, focused. "They know we're here," he said simply, placing the tablet on the table. "The Coalition hunters have tracked unusual energy readings to this street. They suspect something. I think they are coming closer." "We can use that." James organized small decoys outside, devices that emitted faint energy signatures designed to confuse the hunters' sensors. Lyra practiced her role as his wife, moving through the house with calm, ordinary behavior, showing no signs of fear. Together, they created an illusion of normalcy, two humans going about daily life, unaware of the danger lurking nearby. By midday, Lyra noticed unusual movements in the street. Sleek, dark vehicles hovered just out of sight, scanning the area. She could see small figures moving with precision, communicating silently with each other. The Coalition hunters had arrived. James remained calm, observing from the window. "Stay inside," he instructed quietly. "Follow my lead. We're going to use everything we've learned, law, perception, and human ingenuity, to keep them from finding you." Humans had a way of projecting calmness even in dangerous situations. If she could imitate that, she might survive. The hunters approached the front door. Lyra held her breath as they knocked sharply, a mechanical, authoritative rhythm that demanded attention. James opened the door just slightly, peering out. "Yes," he said, his voice steady. The leader of the Coalition hunters stepped forward, tall and imposing in a sleek uniform that seemed to absorb light. "We are here to investigate a breach," the figure said. "We have reason to believe an unauthorized alien is present. You will cooperate." "I will be glad to assist within the law." Humans were not physically strong compared to the hunters, but their courage, intelligence, and moral resolve created an invisible shield that technology could not penetrate. James was ordinary in appearance, yet extraordinary in action. The hunters hesitated. They were advanced, disciplined, and used to commanding obedience through force, but humans were different. They relied on rules, procedures, and a collective sense of justice that could slow even the most precise machines. James understood this, and he used it to their advantage. Lyra could feel the tension building. She realized that survival was not just about hiding anymore. It was about strategy, perception, and trust. Humans could turn ordinary things into powerful tools. They could manipulate perception, exploit laws, and protect those they cared about in ways that brute force could not overcome. Minutes passed. The hunters discussed among themselves, confused and frustrated by the legal obstacle. James stood firm, his calm demeanor unwavering. Lyra joined him at the door, pretending to speak to him quietly, maintaining the illusion of an ordinary household. Finally, the hunters retreated slightly, constrained by the boundaries of human law. They could not risk direct confrontation without exposing themselves to legal and social consequences. Lyra felt a wave of relief but knew this was only temporary. The coalition would return and they would be more determined. As the evening approached, James turned to Lyra. "You see what I mean?" he asked quietly. "Humans can be underestimated, but we have patience, strategy, and resilience. You don't survive by force alone. You survive by knowing the rules and using them to your advantage." Instead, she was learning that survival could involve trust, partnership, and understanding a species' unique strengths. Humans were ordinary in appearance, yet extraordinary in essence. Over the next few days, the hunters monitored from a distance, testing patterns, probing for weaknesses, but James and Lyra stayed one step ahead. They adapted, using subtle decoys, human routines, and clever strategies to confuse the coalition. Lyra marveled at the ingenuity required, not just her own, but James's. He was patient, observant, and capable of seeing possibilities she had never considered. One evening, after a particularly tense day, they sat together in the living room, sharing a simple meal. Lyra looked at James quietly. "I did not realize humans could be this, resourceful. I thought you were simple, weak. But you are clever, persistent, and strong in ways I did not understand. That is what makes humans dangerous when underestimated." Coalition agents had stationed themselves near the neighborhood, observing every movement. Lyra could feel their eyes, even from a distance, and she knew they were planning their next step. James, however, remained calm. He had a plan. They moved carefully, using small diversions and everyday human behavior to obscure their activities. Lyra cooked, cleaned, and maintained her role as James's wife, while James orchestrated distractions, random lights, controlled sounds, minor disturbances, that drew the agents' attention away from their home. The hunters were precise, but human unpredictability and creativity created confusion. By afternoon, the coalition agents grew frustrated. Their instruments could not penetrate the subtlety of human life. They were forced to retreat, at least temporarily, unable to locate Lyra directly. The human advantage, rules, routine, and ingenuity had held. That evening, James turned to Lyra. "Do you understand now?" he asked. "Humans are underestimated because we seem ordinary, but ordinary is powerful when used wisely. You came here expecting weakness, but you found strength. Not just mine, but humanity's. You are extraordinary in your own way." As night fell, they sat quietly, the city lights glowing softly outside. The coalition hunters were still out there, watching, calculating, and planning, but Lyra felt a sense of calm. For now, humans had proven their strength, ingenuity, and moral resolve. Together, she and James could face whatever challenges lay ahead. And for the first time since arriving on Earth, she allowed herself to imagine a future, not just of survival, but of partnership, understanding, and the possibility that she might belong, even in a world that was not her own. The morning sun broke through the city haze, casting soft gold across the streets. Lyra awoke with a sense of anticipation she could not ignore. The danger had not vanished. Coalition forces were still in orbit, still watching, still searching. But for the first time, she felt a real possibility of freedom. James was already awake, sipping coffee in the kitchen, calm and composed as always. "Morning," he said without looking up. "I have news. The coalition is reconsidering its approach. Their latest reports show they cannot locate you, and the human social networks are stronger than they expected. We've bought ourselves some time. The law, society, and patience, those are weapons they cannot fully understand." Each action seemed mundane to outsiders, but it created a web of protection, a shield of normalcy around their home. Lyra watched him, realizing that human strength lay not in raw power, but in the ability to unite, to adapt, and to manipulate perception. By afternoon, coalition agents arrived once more, their sleek craft hovering silently near the neighborhood. Lyra's pulse quickened, but she did not panic. She had learned to trust James, and more than that, she had learned to trust humanity itself. James moved deliberately to the front window, observing the craft. "They are cautious this time," he said. "They know we are clever. They are testing boundaries, but humans have rules and we will use them." "What should I do?" A small crowd of neighbors had gathered subtly, pretending to engage in daily life, yet their presence created legal and social barriers that the hunters could not easily breach. James used the confusion to maneuver carefully, presenting documents, evidence, and authority in ways the coalition could not ignore. Lyra watched, fascinated. Humans were ordinary yet extraordinary. They relied on patience, intelligence, and community to overcome forces far larger and more powerful than themselves. It was not brute strength that saved them. It was cleverness, perseverance, and moral resolve. The hunters hesitated, unsure how to proceed. Any aggressive action would trigger human laws, social networks, and consequences. They had underestimated humans, thinking them simple, weak, and predictable. Instead, they encountered a species capable of defense without violence, of strategy without weapons, and of unity without force. James turned to Lyra quietly. "Watch carefully. Humans can do amazing things when they protect what matters." Humans coordinated signals, subtle movements, and carefully placed communications to confuse and delay the coalition. The hunters grew frustrated, their precision compromised by social structures and human ingenuity. Hours passed, and still, they could not locate Lyra directly. By evening, the coalition withdrew, at least temporarily. They would return with caution, reassessing their approach in the face of unexpected human resilience. Lyra felt a mixture of relief and awe. She had survived, yes, but more than that, she had witnessed humanity's true strength. It was patience, cleverness, and courage, not physical might, that had protected her. That night, Lyra and James sat together in the quiet of the living room. The city outside hummed softly, lights flickering in the distance. Lyra turned to him, her voice soft but firm. "I have learned so much from you, from humans. You are clever, patient, and strong in ways I did not understand. I came here to survive, but I have discovered more than that. I have discovered hope. It drives action, inspires courage, and strengthens bonds. You've seen it firsthand. Humans are underestimated because we appear ordinary, but our strength is often invisible until tested. You've shown me that survival is not just about hiding or fleeing, but about understanding, adapting, and trusting." Lyra had come to Earth alone, desperate, hunted, and afraid. But through trust, partnership, and mutual understanding, she had found not only safety but also connection. Survival had become more than endurance, it had become collaboration, respect, and shared purpose. The following morning, the coalition sent a final message, a warning rather than a threat. Humans had proven capable of more than the hunters expected. Attempts to capture Lyra were now discouraged by legal, social, and diplomatic pressure. Earth had asserted itself as a neutral sanctuary, and the coalition had little choice but to respect that authority, at least for now. Lyra stood at the window, watching the horizon. She felt a profound sense of relief. She was free, safe. But more than that, she had learned to trust, not only in James, but in humanity itself. She had come to hide, but she had found strength, wisdom, and a sense of belonging. James joined her, standing quietly at her side. "The worst is behind us for now," he said softly. "You're safe, and that is what matters. I am learning, growing, and feeling hope for the future. I have found shelter not just in a home, but in a species I once underestimated. And I am grateful for you, for humanity, and for this chance. That's why we endure." And more than that, it was about understanding the power of allies, trust, and moral courage. Days passed. The city returned to its usual rhythm, the coalition's presence a distant memory. Lyra adapted fully to life with James, learning human habits, routines, and social norms. She cooked, cleaned, observed, and participated in ordinary life, all while remaining mindful of the potential dangers beyond the horizon. Over time, their partnership evolved. It was no longer simply about survival or deception. It was about mutual respect, understanding, and the quiet bond forged in shared danger. Lyra realized that she had come to trust James, not just as a protector, but as a friend and ally. One evening, as the sun set and the city was bathed in golden light, Lyra stepped outside with James. The streets were calm, the air cool and refreshing. She breathed deeply, feeling the freedom she had long sought. No longer was she hunted, no longer was she alone. She had found safety, companionship, and a sense of belonging. James looked at her, his expression calm and steady. "You're safe now," he said simply. Lyra smiled. "More than safe, I am home." Humanity had not only protected her, it had inspired her, taught her, and shown her that courage, ingenuity, and morality could overcome even the most relentless threats. She had come to Earth desperate and alone, but she would remain as a witness to humanity's strength, a species underestimated by the galaxy, yet capable of remarkable acts when tested. The coalition had underestimated humans, and in doing so, they had revealed a truth Lyra would carry forever. Humans were not the weakest species. nor the simplest. They were clever, resourceful, and capable of extraordinary resilience. And when they chose to protect someone, even a stranger, they could change the course of events in ways no technology or force could predict. Lyra looked at James, feeling gratitude, respect, and a quiet admiration. "Thank you," she said softly, "for everything, for shelter, for trust, for showing me what humans are capable of. We all have strengths, and together we can face anything." Survival had become more than endurance. It had become a partnership, a lesson in trust, and a chance to witness the extraordinary strength of humanity. As night deepened, she stood quietly by the window, looking out at the city. She had come to Earth expecting to hide, to pretend, and to survive. Instead, she had discovered hope, courage, and the quiet but unyielding strength of humans. And for the first time, she allowed herself to imagine a future where she belonged, not just as a refugee, but as a participant in a world that had welcomed her despite her differences. Lyra turned to James, a soft smile on her face. "I will stay," she said, "not because I have to, but because I choose to." For the first time, she felt it fully: safety, belonging, and the quiet power of a species that had been underestimated by the galaxy. Humanity had won, not through violence, but through intelligence, resilience, and morality. And in that victory, she found her own freedom, her own hope, and a future worth living. The city outside remained calm, indifferent yet alive, and Lyra knew that whatever came next, she and James, and by extension humanity, could face it together. For the first time, she understood that strength was not just about force, speed, or technology. Strength was patience, courage, cleverness, and the willingness to protect those you care about. And with that understanding, Lyra felt truly free.